We're going to brew one with our hybrid brewer. For me, this works really well with sort of more natural, honey, more funky processed coffees that end up needing a little bit of bypass in a brew, but can also aid from having a higher extraction and a more even extractions at the bed here. So it's super simple to use. From that flat, we're just going to fold over twice on each side. And then I like to just pop my finger in the middle to get a nice little flat bed there, and then pop it in the dripper. I like to use my fingers at the top to hold the paper still while I wet it. For me, this works really well with the Booster 22 that will sit underneath the bed of the hybrid brewer and is specifically designed for this. So now we're going to do a quick brew. I've got 16 grams of coffee for my hybrid cone brewer, and it's fairly coarse ground. I've chosen here quite a funky natural coffee that sort of has a little bit of that processing taste that, you know, we don't need to extract a lot out of. We can sort of keep this one relatively low extraction, sort of 18-19%. And we're going to use 93-degree water. We've got our B3 hybrid and our V60, the small one. And we're going to do about a 1:15 ratio here. I'm just going to do 5 pours. The first one is going to be about 40 grams as a bloom. I like to give a little swirl at the start of these ones to try and get that bed a little bit more even. We're going to wait about 30 seconds between each of our pours, and we're just going to do 5 equal pours after this to get up to 240 mils. So 16 to 240, 93 degrees. Quite a coarse grind of a natural coffee for me. Don't need to do so much extraction out of these ones. Rather, we can do 18-19%, something like this. And when we're pouring, we're going to pour quite aggressively around the circles and back to the center to stop. It's quite a simple way of brewing like this, but you know, doing sort of 140 gram and then the rest 50 gram pours is going to give us sort of like a nicer way of extracting this sort of a coffee. We don't need to add all of our water, especially in a conical dripper that's then going to have a lot of bypass. But instead here, we're able to just keep that water level relatively low so that most of our coffee is extracting, most of our water is extracting through the coffee. So every 30 seconds roughly, pouring 50 grams. This should mean that we end up having a total brew time of around 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes, depending on how slowly or fast that last drawdown goes through. So doing that last pour at 2 minutes. Perfect. I'll give a little swirl at the end. This style of brewing really works well with sort of natural and more heavily processed coffees that you don't want to extract too much out of. When we're doing our pouring, we do want to be quite aggressive and get a little bit of agitation in there. It's quite a fast pour. It should be taking about 10 seconds to do. And this is going to help to keep that extraction more even by circulating and agitating through the bed. So now we're done here at 2.5 minutes. We can have a try. It actually smells pretty good. So here we have some of this coffee from the B3 hybrid small size. I mean, it's just like what I was describing, where we can extract a lot out of this coffee evenly, but not trying to push for like a 22% extraction or anything. It stays a bit lower. So we get a really nice body from that 1:15 ratio, but then also very clear flavors. And I think that's really a lot to do with how the B3 paper interacts with the coffee. And in particular, the evenness that we get, where it's not sort of sour or dry. It's very even and consistent in the taste profile. And then that's mostly because we don't have that extra coffee hanging out below in the cone, but rather we're keeping a more even extraction, everything in touching the walls of the V60 here. So for me, that's the style of coffee and the style of brewing that I would approach for a natural coffee with the B3 hybrid. In this case, the small one with the small B60 fits just perfectly. Super cool. Now we're going to go to something where we're trying to push the extraction a little bit more with a more wash style coffee.